Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now today we must talk about the best mutant champions in the game, and this list is very interesting to make because there have been tons of changes. In the last 6 to 9 months the game has changed quite drastically, and some of the champions that previously seemed extremely dominant and at the very top have completely fallen off. Plenty of champions that previously seemed good but not great still have maintained their positions, and there are some absolutely new arrivals that have smashed the game wide open and completely kind of like redefined the class. So before we go any further, I do want to remind you guys that this is a mixture of my own personal thoughts and opinions as well as current game relevance and trends, and that is exactly what is effectively driving these lists. It's not necessarily a single factor, a single game mode, it's the overall desirability. The champions that do generate the most excitement in players, the champions that do end up getting the most catalyst, the champions that we do see at the most competitive levels of the game that people are going all out for are the ones that are favored in this type of list. It's not necessarily about who's strictly best on the paper, ability per ability, because a lot of times a champion can have a ton of abilities and they just don't do what we need them to do right now. And there are a ton of examples like that on this list either. So keep an open mind and understand that we do not all play the game in exactly the same way. We do care for different things, and we play at different levels and all that other stuff. This isn't a list that's gonna, fit exactly to your idea of the game. This is currently the way I view the game and the way I think most of the community or most of the competitive, hardcore, sweaty, try-hard community views the game. And that said, we can look at the old Mutant top 10, and there are definitely massive and major changes going to be here. And let's get to the nitty-bitty gritty part of the video and look at the Mutant class overall. I still think Mutant class overall is one of the weaker ones in the game, but they are definitely on the up, and I think they have just about caught up to the rest of the classes. We can see that Kabam is giving them some extra love with already 3 champions being released in 2024, which is most of the any class pretty much, or tied with Tex, I believe, for the most. And then there have been some very impactful additions and buffs as well. Nightcrawler got a buff, and that's, Kabam kind of like upgrading the class because now he's much more viable than he was before. We got Onslaught at the very end of the last year, and obviously Mr. Sinister has received a buff, as well as some extremely desirable mutants have been released as 7-star since. All that taken in consideration, before we get to the actual top 10, we need to give out the honorable mentions. And the first honorable mention that I did not put in top 10 is APOC, because the truth of the matter is APOC is a great champion that solves no current problems. APOC is not present in Alliance War, APOC is not present in Battlegrounds, and APOC is significantly less present in any other game mode than he has ever been. Obviously, him not being out as a 7-star could be a fairly big part of it, because he kind of, needs to be as this tanky and max rank champion, in my opinion, to do the best. And then it's just the fact that he kind of relies on synergies and pre-fights and ramp-ups, and all of those things are in the game where we don't need them currently. The synergies and ramp-up is not possible in Battlegrounds. Synergies are quite hard in Alliance War, and ramp-up is possible, but again, there are just better options. And for questing as well, because once the champion kind of starts falling off and gets left behind, even when APOC could answer these problems, people don't tend to look at, let's say, 6-star rank 5, 6-star rank 3 APOC when you have 7-star rank 2 mutants to use, and you're just going to use something that's maybe not as compatible with the nodes and requirements, but is much higher rank and therefore will brute force their way through much more. A perfect example of this is the fact that my APOC is still rank 3. I could rank 5 him at any moment. Catalysts aren't that big of a deal. It's just I have very little to no reason to do so, and I don't plan to do that anytime soon either. And that's why we are here. APOC is a great champion with tons of utility and tons of abilities that are just not what the game demands of players right now, and therefore he's not in the top 10 list, even though, again, on paper he absolutely should be. And the funny thing is, if only APOC received like a small buff, let's say if APOC would start specifically in Battlegrounds with 2 more of his genetic code, so if he would start with like 3 genetic code, that would drastically improve his damage output. And if they would release him as 7-star, APOC could potentially be back at the top of the game. But that hasn't happened, and he isn't. And therefore, again, we don't see many people using or investing in APOC right now. Similar case has been for Kitty. Where is that Kitty Pryde? Kitty Pryde, again, on paper, is a crazy good champion that can do so much. In reality, again, she's kind of largely absent. I don't remember last time I saw her in Valiant. Oh, I did see her once this season, and somebody used their 6-star Ascended Kitty Pryde to try and take down Atuma, and it went fairly poorly for them. He did finish the match, but it took forever, and on top of that, they lost a lot of health. The point is, Kitty is one more champion that could potentially become significantly more popular with the release of 7-stars, because critting with Kitty is super important, and because of the challenger rating and no crit stat focus, Kitty is significantly less effective than she could be if she was a 7-star. On top of it all, just doesn't seem, again, that she does the things that are needed. She's quite squishy, and that is felt ever so more often right now when you're going up against 7-star champions with block penetration and opponents are chunkier and so on and so forth. And again, as an end result, people hardly rank up Kitty. I think mine has stayed at rank 4 as well. I have never felt the need to rank 5 or ascend Kitty Pryde. And I hardly see her anywhere in Battlegrounds, in Alliance Wars, or Incursions. And there are obviously some specific boss fights that she's still very good. And she is a good champion, but without her existing as a 7-star, that just is not much that people use her for. And people are gonna automatically jump on the idea that this list is just for 7-stars. No, it isn't just for 7-stars. There are plenty of champions that are going to be featured higher on the list that also do not exist as 7-stars, but for them it matters less, or a lot less, because their abilities or playstyle are not as reliant on, the chip damage, they don't end up taking as much chip damage as some others do, or they're just tankier in general, or their playstyles are different. So it is individual for each and every single case. For instance, Future Ant-Man in Tech Class is still one of the most dominant champions, but he's not out as a 7-star. And for some champions, it just matters a lot less. Unfortunately, Kitty has had a massive drop-off too. Now, Nightcrawler, I think he's kind of cool. I think it was a solid buff. I think he's just about teetering of top 10 mutants. And could have maybe made spot number 9 or 10. But overall, again, I just don't think he's quite there. But it's still a solid shout-out. It's still a good champion. Iceman is making a somewhat of a return. Again, possibly you could squeeze him in towards the bottom of top 10. You do see Iceman here and there recently. And his buff definitely didn't kind of like jump him straight to the top of the game, but it's been solid, it's been decent, and you can't complain about it too much. And another champion that I always looked at as kind of like a solid champion, never the greatest, and if she did make top lists before, that was kind of due to the lack of competition, is Storm Pyramid X. Storm Pyramid X, again, has her place, just like OG Storm does. She can be somewhat annoying on defense, she has her bits of utility, it's just that she's hardly ever the first choice of any player to go for, to rank up and invest. And she's good, not great in my opinion. And last champion that has slid out just of top 10 is Toad. Another champ that would do great as a 7-star. Unfortunately, we do not have him as a 7-star yet. But he has his place, he has his moments, he has his metas. I do have this guy at rank 5. I like using him. I just don't think he's quite as strong as some of the champions we're going to be discussing later on in the list. That said, let's get to spot number 10. Now we're starting. So who actually made the list? So at the very beginning, I'm going to put Negasonic there. It is still kind of hard to say whether it's just the fresh car smell, but we do see her in the game. I don't think she lived up to the hype. at all. I don't think she's what people hoped her to be. Like the skill class destroying powerhouse. She destroys the skill class, except that it's not necessarily as easy to do so as people imagined it would be. And then on top of it all, she's not doing it particularly fast. That said, slow and steady often does win the race, and there are metas where she will, dominate when we are being slowed down. And I do see her having an impact in the game overall, just not as much in Battlegrounds due to the fight speed. I do think in Alliance War, she's going to be a very solid option to counter, the peskiest skill defenders pretty much in perpetuity, because I don't think there's much that Kabam can do with skill class that she will not counter. I do see her, being significant in some challenge modes, in story content, and pretty much everywhere else. And I do see her having a moderate presence in Battlegrounds. It has some defensive capabilities. Her defense is not that strong, but in general, it's still quite hard to judge. You could, I think, easily give that spot number 10 to Toad, in my opinion. But for now, I put Negasonic there because we do genuinely see more of her about. Spot number 9 is going to go to Dust. Now, Dust, again, is kind of a similar case to Storm Pyramid X, in my opinion, except that she is better on defense. And she kind of counters few more skill matchups. So I do see her kind of like a modernized version of Storm Pyramid X, where she's extremely mediocre in most of the matchups offensively, but very, very good and solid in specific metas and specific matchups where opponent shrugs those debuffs off, and so on and so forth. And then she's just a better defender. Dust is better on defense than Storm Pyramid X is. It is harder to play against her. It is harder to parry. If you do mess up, there's quite immediately plenty of damage coming your way. Your willpower is shut off, so all the chip damage adds up. And she does have a moderate presence in top tier content. When she was a tactic attacker, she was extremely present in Alliance Wars, but she still carries on being used to, again, a moderate degree. And you can see her thereabout on Battlegrounds decks as well. So that's thereabout. I don't think she's insanely amazing champion. I don't think she's a bad champion either. I think she's fine, good, solid. Kind of like similarly to how I look at Shield in skill class, pretty much. Nothing insanely crazy, but not bad by any means. Now that those two champions are put out of the way, spot number 8. Spot number 8 is Omega Red. Now Omega Red is a unique mystic. Is a unique mutant. We have always discussed this, that he's kind of like uniquely a champion in Mutant Class that doesn't rely on prowess, doesn't rely on special damage, and delivers his damage in like a fairly interesting way with somewhat unique, damage over time passive mechanic as well as degen. And that's still the case. He still has plenty of good matchups. It's just that he's becoming harder and harder to use, and his attribute to being on this list entirely comes down to Omega Days. If we don't have a 7-star Omega Red, if we don't have all those 6 stones that people gave Omega Red to rank him up, he would not be on this list. But it happened, it is, and he now is present. People do bring him in Alliance Wars, people do bring him in Battlegrounds as well. I must say that the AI is absolutely screwing Omega Red over, similarly like it is to Tiger and a handful of other champions, because the AI recovery speed is insane. I remember having Omega Red fight against Jessica Jones, where I baited out heavy attack from Jessica Jones, dashed back immediately, charged my own heavy attack, released it as fast as I could, and she still dexed it out of it and smacked me in the face straight afterwards. AI recovery speeds are an issue, and it definitely is bothering Omega Red to be, more capable than he could be. And then on top of it all, Kabam, for whatever reason, have done the most disgusting, inconsistent mechanic with Omega Red's Death Spores and Strikers as well. It is incredibly hard to use a Striker with Omega Red, which could be huge for the character. And it's kind of ironic because we have so many champions that lean into the Strikers, like Chavez and Silk and so on and so forth, that significantly help these champions to do better. But it does not for Omega Red because his spores start falling off for whatever reason. So only time you can activate the Striker effectively is after you connect the first hit of the heavy attack, then go into Striker and then go for like a combo and a special or something. So it's still possible. It just makes very little sense because almost all other champions especially if they are defensive champions, still maintain their defensive abilities when hit by strikers. So very inconsistent, to say the least, and I hope Kabam does change that in the near future, and that immediately could be significant help to Omega Red. Next up, we have Havoc, that has been released as 7-star in not that distant past either. And Havoc is one of those champions that is solid in general and crazy good in specific situations. And it's one of my personal favorites. I'm not going to hide it, but I absolutely do love Havoc and how he has aged in between his energy resistance, in between his interactions with energy damage over time debuffs, the fact that he can maintain a ton of debuffs on the opponent, kind of slow play it and do it with a dot, and then finish out fights with big level 3. Havoc I have ended up using in just about every single Alliance War season as well, for hazard shift lanes or something like that. He does have his non-contact mediums and heavies, which help him with some of the more tougher skill defenders as well. And I think Havoc has his place. I still think Havoc has his use in game. He's not the fastest. You will not want to run Havoc in every single situation meta. And he still puts in work. He absolutely does. He's aging gracefully. He's one of the best onslaught counters as well, which has helped him. And he in general counters so much in the game. My apologies for that. I had to quickly reply to somebody very, very, very important. But back to Havoc. I don't think there is much that I can say about Havoc that I haven't said before. Again, Incinerate immunity is quite useful. Energy resistance is great. Passive power gain can be helpful as well in the fights where you have to stall and kind of throw heavy attacks and do maximum damage with minimum hits involved. And I still find tremendous value in Havoc. I have 6-star and 5 Ascended. If I pull the 7-star, I'd rank him up. And if I would want to take him to rank 3 as well. Next up, just above Havoc, I have kind of switched these positions. I'm going to put Sunspot. Sunspot is kind of living his best life still. He is effectively the most popular Mystic straight-up nuke. That's what he is. He does have some solid utility. And the success of Sunspot kind of lies in the fact that he's capable of taking quite a lot of significant matchups still. He's one of the fastest and best Nick Fury counters. He's one of the champions that can go outside of his class relationships and do tremendously well against Sasquatch and Man-Thing and a ton of Mystic threats. And he's extremely intimidating champion to be going up against, and he has definitely seen a lot of love. You do see Sunspot all the time, pretty much everywhere. Next, we're going to be talking about a champion that undeniably has had a downfall. And that's nowhere near as crazy of a downfall as some other champions, but Archangel is not as dangerous as he once was. Part of it could be the fact that obviously he does not exist as a 7-star, but I think mainly it is the fact that a ton of, or most of the new champions seemingly get put through the filter of making sure that you can't Archangel them properly. You can kind of Archangel a Bullseye, for instance, but you're still going to end up taking some damage. You can't really Archangel an Onslaught. You can't Archangel a Photon. You can't Archangel a Serpent, or not properly anyways. And there just always seem to be these things that are hindering him. You can't Archangel, Dust, and it's quite tricky to Archangel Mr. Sinister, and it's quite tricky to Archangel Red Skull. And he has kind of lost that if it bleeds, it dies type of situation. There is much more to be taken in consideration, and the amount of current matchups that he does has definitely shrunk. That said, he's still amazing, and when he works, he destroys story content, he destroys Alliance War matchups, and even in Battlegrounds, once you do get him in matchups that, are suitable for him, he's crazy good option. But him being crazy good option has also kind of had a fallback, because Archangel's playstyle requires you to parry a lot, and more champions have block penetration, crits through block, and stuff like that. So you're going to end up taking chip damage. He's not necessarily as fast now as, the 7-star rank 3s can nuke. He's not as fast as CGR for the most part. He's not as fast as, ranked up Sunspot. So we do see less of him. Still a must-have staple, I think, in every account. Still think every, dedicated player should have Archangel ranked up and ideally Ascended, because he still does, and will come useful for as long as I can think of, basically. But his reign of terror, so to speak, is also ended. It just has. He's nowhere near as scary, significant, as dominant as he was. Therefore, he has moved down from second spot to fifth. For number 4, again, a slight downgrade, but effectively Bishop's doing just as well as he always has been, if not better. He's one of those champions that, yeah, you can mess up against Bishop with just about any champion, but for the most part, people have gotten used to his level 2 and know how to fight him. He's also one of those trap defenders where a ton of champions do find it extremely difficult to fight against Bishop because you can't really bleed him, can't put energy damage dots on him. You need to push him to specific special attacks, so you can't really, rely on him playing into you, and that fight can be nasty on defense. But obviously, it's still his offensive prowess that works as well. The fact that he, has his passive stuns, that the fact that he heavily punishes skilled champions, the fact that he synergizes with a ton of nodes extremely well, and still has plenty of crazy good matchups like the Bullseye and like a whole bunch of others, be that in skill class or be that in others. A very solid champion, very present in the game, extremely, current in the metas. Absolutely zero regrets about taking this guy up as well. But he got a slight downfall because I think, number 1, Domino is continuing to impress. Domino is, I think, the most sigged up 7-star. I think out of all the 7-stars in the game, I have seen most high sig Dominos. And there's a very good reason for that, because she's still a defensive nightmare that absolutely demands a specific set of counters, and the pool isn't that big. And even with a good counter, she can still fudge you up with those evades and ability fails and whatnot. And then she's also a capable attacker. Inconsistent, sure. You can do the same fight with Domino in 30 seconds or in 80 seconds. That can happen, yes. But for most part, she does well enough to be very dangerous on attack, taking, again, plenty of tricky matchups, and most importantly, forcing out the people of absolutely having to have a counter for her, knowing that they might never face her because you can just turn around and use Domino on attack. And there is still a ton of value in that. And she just works. She's putting in work, and people, are wary of Domino for sure. And I don't see her going away anytime soon, especially having seen how much investment people have put into the character. But number 2, and this is going to be great. Okay, so now we're going to be cooking. Now we're going to be talking, and this is going to be unexpected. I think Onslaught is second best mutant in the game right now. I think Onslaught was the best mutant in the game the moment he was released up until like a month ago. I do think Onslaught's on defense have lost a lot of the scary factor, which was a big part of his kit. And I do think that Onslaught on offense, when talking about specifically for Battlegrounds, is not as fast as, it's good, it's useful, I use it, but it has to be like a very specific meta or a very specific matchup setup where he's going to, be effective enough. Overall in game, though, he's doing great. Still a very, again, potent Alliance War defender, very potent Alliance War attacker. I do think, he does a tremendous job across most of the significant game modes, and he is the most hunted new release. Onslaught was realistically the last really powerful 7-star that we have seen. That isn't like a bullshit defender. Onslaught's a hard defender, but at the very least, you can kind of take Onslaught with most of the champions in game, unlike Bullseye, unlike Serpent. He does have, again, some hints of those annoying defensive trends like switching off willpower, but at the very least, you have to have made a mistake and you have to have parried in order for your willpower to get switched off. All put together, it was super close when making this decision. I think he's the best mutant 7-star in the game right now. I do think unless the number 1 champion gets released as a 7-star, he's going to take that number 1 spot back very, very soon. And yeah, he's just great champion with tons of utility with his, resistances to bleed, incinerate, and shock. Super useful for like hazard shift lanes and ton of different matchups, and limits his offensive options. The fact that his light and medium attacks do not make first light and medium attack do not make contact, again, enables him to take a ton of matchups. Increase ability accuracy against skills, great. The passive stands when opponents are debuff immune is awesome. All of his debuffs effectively, working as passives if opponent shrugs them off or gets rid of them. Great stuff. There are a few issues with Onslaught. For instance, I do think that his heavy attack pause while still pausing the opponent, while still having opponent stunned, is too short. I think they should have changed that, realistically speaking, because there's a massive difference, and that forces you to either be perfect on your spacing or take a lot of block damage. Other than that, I think he's a very, 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 very strong addition to the Mutant class, and it has significantly helped Mutant class to catch up with the other classes. But that said, I just think Sinister right now is better. I think Sinister is scarier in defense, with less great counters. I do think Sinister is similarly fast on offense if opponents have inequity, but he finishes the fights much healthier and has much more room for error. I do think Sinister in like long questing scenarios again has better chance, because he effectively, people do forget, is also a ramp up champion where he becomes progressively more powerful as you do use him in like quests or incursions. I do think Sinister again requires very specific solutions to him, and has been like one of the best buffs that we have seen in a very, very long time. I genuinely think that, pound for pound, Sinister is the best mutant in the game right now. He's the one that I end up drafting the most, or going up against the most, or using the most. And again, similarly, you're forcing opponent to get a counter for him, knowing that they might never face him, because again, there's plenty of offensive capability. Sinister also, outside of polygons, is much more capable in attack than people think, because he does get heavily gimped by Inequity Mastery, reducing his damage by a whole third, because he debuffs himself effectively a ton. And his modified attack is very significant to his degeneration damage, and that has like a huge impact. But when Inequity is not present, especially when you can like run Recall Masteries, he's actually like insane damage god as well. So everything put together, again, I can completely understand people who want to put Onslaught above him. And again, unless Mr. Sinister gets released as a 7-star, by the next time I'm doing rankings, he's not going to stay up top. And that's going to be like a set rule for like every class, pretty much. Or most classes. There might be like one exception, but we'll see about it. But for most part, I don't think 6 months from now, any champion that does not exist as a 7-star can be in like top of their class. They just can't, because the lack of the base health and attack is going to be too noticeable. It is a hindrance right now. It definitely has affected how many people are ranking up these champions, and how often we see them. Again, as I explained before, for some champions more than others. I do think some champions, like Mr. Sinister, still doing well, really well, existing as 6 stars only. But I think a ton of champions don't, and a ton of champions have been left behind just because they are not at 7 stars that could potentially be significant in the game. But that's all the more reason to accept Sinister as the best mutant in the game, because he's not a 7-star, and he is effectively the most visible, most seen, most used mutant in the highest levels of the game, in my opinion. So that is where I stand with the mutant class. Again, there are tons of good mutants that we could talk that still have things to offer. I do think that, Magneto still has a place in the game. I do think that, White Magneto is also a very significant part of the mutant class. I do think that, Nightcrawler potentially could have a glow up. There's Danny Moonstar, who, based on the metas and champions being released, can be very significant. 7-star Weapon X is coming to the game. That could give him a boost. But this is the way I currently see the game. These are the mutants that I think are currently the most used, the best, the most hyped, the ones that are answering the problems that we have right now. So here's the old list, here's the new list, and I do hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. We are going to be coming back next with Cosmic top 10 list. Also going to see some significant changes, so I hope that you guys are looking forward to it. That's it for now, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the